I'm a zennial, someone who identifies with having an analog childhood and a digital adolescence and adulthood. I was always the kid that was a step behind everyone else when it came to technology. My interaction with the internet and home computing was limited to school and my grandparents' house. My grandmother was a quality control supervisor at IBM and various other companies over the years. Almost always she had the latest in computers and one of the very first public internet accounts on the server Prodigy. Since I only saw my grandmother occasionally, I can never really master the use of her PC because by the time I'd visit, she'd upgraded. I learned DOS. That was helpful. My school had Macs, so using or learning a PC didn't come in handy until later. I purchased my first computer my senior year of high school. I worked all summer at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and I was excited to finally be able to join the rest of the world with technology. I bought a used 486 IBM compatible with a whopping 4 megabytes of RAM and a 500 megabyte hard drive. It had a 9600 baud modem. That was the fastest you can get before the 14.4s came out. I also recall having to get a separate phone line for my house because otherwise I'd irritate my parents or be bumped off the internet because I'd be on the phone all the time and call waiting would kick me off. I didn't know much about the internet back then because the only thing I really interacted with were chat rooms and the community areas that were available through Prodigy. When I graduated high school in 1996, our school had just launched their website. Goodness knows if I could remember it. It was a paragraph long, and it was full of a bunch of ampersands, plus signs, and other symbols that I can't remember. I turned my final papers in my senior year. I was so excited to actually have Microsoft Word. I didn't actually use the internet for research for a paper until I got into college. Things have changed so much. Ultimately, I graduated from 2 schools with the aid of the internet. My bachelor's, and then of course, Meadville Lombard, the low residency program they offered for the seminary. Just the other day, I was driving down Ball Road with my husband, and I don't know if you've ever driven down Ball Road in Anaheim, but there's a great big marquee for Ganal Lumber, and they always have some little witticism up on that marquee. And it said, "Respect your parents, kids. They graduated school without the use of Google." I laughed at this because for me, it's true. I remember going to the library, checking in first with the librarian to find out what I would need, and she would tell you where to start. I remember sifting through the card catalogs, learning the basics of the Dewey Decimal System, and the scent of old books as you pulled them from the stacks. I remember having to read the book, take copious notes, and then morph that into some semblance of a paper. By the time I became a parent, I had already learned how to build my own PCs, and my young son would grow up knowing how to use a computer before he could learn to even write. Because of where we lived, we opted to homeschool Jordan, so most of his development as a student was done via computer. By the time he was in the 3rd grade, it was recommended that we don't worry about teaching him handwriting because he knew how to type faster than both myself and my ex-wife combined. Now I find myself using my smartphone more than my laptop more than my PC. Jordan has never lived in a world without the internet. For him, instead of sifting through a card catalog looking at one book from another, which he could base his report on, he has to sift through a myriad of Google results and decide what to narrow it down to. Instead of being able to take a card from a catalog at face value, he must investigate whether or not a website or an online source is legitimate, which has inundated him with even more stress and anxiety. Too much information. Too much information or data overload has been a problem for millennia. In Ecclesiastes, I'm probably mispronouncing that, and that's okay. Give me grace. In Ecclesiastes 12:12 of the Hebrew Bible, the writer tells us, "Of anything beyond these, my child, beware. Of making many books, there is no end. As much study is in weariness of the flesh." The Desert Fathers apparently didn't believe in research or studying. I'd like to see a student use that as an example of why they couldn't write their book report. During the first century, the famous Roman rhetorician Seneca the Elder commented that the abundance of books was a distraction. During the Renaissance, with the invention of the printing press, scholars complained that the abundance of information was now available to the average person was just too much. It was distracting, and it was difficult to manage. Too much information. In the 18th century, many grew concerned about the rise of books in Europe, especially in England, France, and Germany. From 1750 to 1800, there was a 150% increase in the production of books. In 1702, jurist and philosopher Christian Thomasius expressed concerns about the overpopulation of books, comparing it to an epidemic. Thomasius felt that with more books published, the standards of publishing books would be decreased. In 1795, German bookseller and publisher Johann Georg Heinzmann said no nation printed as much as Germany, and he expressed concern about Germans reading ideas and no longer creating original thoughts or their own ideas. Too much information. In the 20th century, we had a rapid succession of print, radio, television, and then finally the internet. Heitzman would be appalled to learn that some of his worst fears came true. Anyone who is anyone can publish anything on the internet. Anything they want to, with no regard to the truth or the veracity of the material that they're publishing. We are now in the information age. We have all the knowledge of the world, for better or for worse, right at the touch of our fingertips. We've developed artificial intelligence in the form of Siri and Alexa, and we can give them a myriad of errands and chores to do for us. That's great, right? We have so many things to do. Isn't it wonderful that we can simply say, Alexa, order toilet paper? Or, Siri, give me directions to that the best Chinese restaurant in town. In a recent NPR piece, child psychologist Rachel Severson noted that young kids likely view these devices very differently than adults do. They may attribute human characteristics to the device, thinking that Alexa has feelings and emotions. Some kids may even think there's actually a tiny woman living inside the device. That's exactly what one little boy, age 4, told them about his Alexa, that she was a person who lived outside his window in another apartment, and he loved her. Severson warns that our children could become as addicted to their Alexa and Google Home as we were once addicted to television when our parents were raising us. These AI do not understand the nuances of speech. To shut off the music versus please turn off the music means the exact same thing to an AI. She warns us that as parents and grandparents, to talk to our devices calmly and with respect as children mimic what they see and hear. We have to be nice to the robots. Too much information. On that note, while strolling through Facebook just the other day, I came across a video that was demonstrating the new Google Assistant. It's the latest in AI technology. In the demo, they had the assistant call a hairdresser to make the user an appointment at a specific time. It understood the subtleties and the nuance of speech, to the point that it even requested a different appointment for the user at a completely different time earlier in the day, because it knew her schedule. In another demonstration, this new Google Assistant called a restaurant to make a reservation and was able to interact calmly and efficiently with the person on the other end who was struggling a little bit with their own English. No longer will you actually have to interact with a person on the phone to make your appointments. Google Assistant can do all of that for you. I saw this and my jaw dropped. My inner nerd thought, thus begins Skynet, and soon they'll take over the world. For those of you that are not as nerdy as I am, Skynet, of course, is the fictional AI in the series of Terminator movies that ultimately decided humanity was the main problem of the Earth and attempted to wipe us out. On a more serious note, what happened to human interaction? Are we doomed to become less and less capable of the simplest interactions because we have our Google Assistant, our Siri, our Alexa? Will we lose the ability to be kind to one another simply because we will not have to practice it publicly? Are we condemned to a world where Alexa is our best friend who lives in an apartment outside our window and we love her? Too much information. Information can lead to knowledge, and knowledge is a powerful thing. The difference is that we must strive to understand as human beings what to do with that information, and that knowledge is so easily accessed through a quick swipe of our fingertips. What we do with all the time that we have saved, because we have Alexa ordering our supplies, we have Siri telling us where to go, where the best place to go is, and we have the Google Assistant booking for us. What do we do with all this information that's flying around us at a rapid pace? The news that's delivered to our phones on a regular rate. I've gotten like 6 examples of this on my phone just in the few moments that I've been standing here. The overwhelming number of notifications from Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. How do we process all this information? In 1755, this concept was introduced by the French philosopher Denis Diderot, although it was not used with the term information overload. He said, as long as the centuries continue to unfold, the number of books will continue to grow. One can predict a time when it will become almost as difficult to learn from anything from books as from the direct study of the entire universe. It will almost be as convenient to search for a bit of truth concealed in nature as it would be to find it hidden away in some immense multitude of bound volumes. Strangely enough, in instances like this where I'm overwhelmed, I'm reminded of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Too much information, data overload, information anxiety, which is actually a thing. These things are things that we as humans have been struggling ever since we put a writing instrument to a receptor. One of the beauties I find in our species is the ability to adapt. We are constantly evolving and have the ability to change quickly and gracefully. Perhaps those desert fathers who wrote Ecclesiastes were right. Of making many books there is no end. Much study is in the weariness of the flesh. We can accept that things are changing and evolving and our technology along with it. We cannot stop progress, but we have the wisdom to stop. We can simply stop. We can breathe. Emerson said, "The happiest man is he who learns from nature the lessons of worship." We have beaches, the deserts, forests. In these places, we can find beauty and respite. We also have this place, this congregation, where we can learn from one another and have genuine human connection. We have the wisdom to know the difference between a kind word from a fellow congregant and a compliment given to us by an AI. Emerson also tells us that every spirit builds itself a house, and beyond its house a world, and beyond its world a heaven. Know then that this world exists for you. For you is the phenomenon perfect. What we are that we can only see. All that Adam had, all that Caesar had, you can have and do. Adam called his house heaven and earth. Caesar called his house Rome. Perhaps you can call yours a cobbler's trade, 100 acres of plowed land, or a scholar's garret. Yet line for line and point by point, your dominion is as great as theirs, though without the fine names. Build, therefore, your own world. Build your own world. Stop. Take only what you need and leave the rest behind. Unplug. Have the courage to make this change. Think of what Diderot said. One can predict a time that will come when it will be almost as difficult to learn anything from books as it would be from the direct study of the universe. Yes, there is still too much information. We need to have the faith that we have the wisdom to know the difference, and we still have very, very much to learn. May it be so.